Welcome to Curtain Up, a podcast that looks at theater productions and artists in the Bay Area and occasionally beyond. I'm Alan Stern, and this is my co-host, Greg Smith.
Greetings from Bangkok, or as we say here, Sawadee Ka.
Greg, what are you doing in Bangkok? Are you surveying the theater there? Because I understand that the Small House of Uncle Thomas is a very popular theatrical production.
Well, oddly enough, I'm not really here for the primary purpose of surveying the theater scene here, but there is a lively international theater scene here in English and other languages. Also, of course, in Thai. Unfortunately, my Thai is not very good, so I would not be able to understand a Thai play. But I do have a British friend who puts on productions here, pantomimes, and also small-scale operas. And so sometime when I'm back and he's doing one at another point, we can perhaps review it. He's a great guy. And he's done a lot of theater in London and in Hong Kong and elsewhere. But I would love to see a production of The Small House of Uncle Thomas. But as you know, I think that's a little politically sensitive in Thailand. They filmed the Jodie Foster version of Anna and the King of Siam in Cambodia because they couldn't film it here, I believe.
Maybe one of these days we'll have Jodie Foster on to talk about that experience.
Would love it. Would love it. We should aim for that. Would love it.
Well, anyway, speaking of Asia, we are going to talk about a show set in Asia, although not in Thailand. The show is M. Butterfly, which is set mostly in China between the 1950s and the 1970s. It's a play by David Henry Hwang, and it's currently at the San Francisco Playhouse. It won the Tony Award when it opened on Broadway back in 1988, starring John Lithgow and B.D. Wong. And in fact, I saw that production, and I was reviewing at that time for the Denver Post, and I interviewed John Lithgow, and he was very gracious. Yeah. Also, I'm going to be seeing John Lithgow in his latest play in New York next month. It's called Giant, and it's about the writer Roald Dahl. You know, he's the author of James and the Giant Peach and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but he was also reputed to be anti-Semitic. So I think the play is about that. But it should be very interesting. It'd be nice to see John Lithgow after all these years. Anyway, M. Butterfly. The play is based on the real life or the real case of a French diplomat who had an affair with a Beijing opera star. And apparently he didn't know, number one, that the opera star was spying on him for the Communist Party. And number two, the opera star was actually a man who performed female roles in drag.
I remember hearing about this story before Henry David Hwang put this into the play and just thinking, this is unreal. You know, how did this happen? And I think actually the real life protagonists were interviewed on 60 Minutes or something, and it just seemed so far-fetched. So what a delicious story, first of all. Also, China in that time was so interesting because I think I was not there in the 50s or the 70s. I was there in the early 80s. But, you know, the transition was happening from old China through to more radically communist China. I mean, just what an incredibly crazy time for anyone to have been there. And then for this story to have transpired against that backdrop makes it even more delicious.
And apparently, traditionally, the female roles in the Beijing opera, they were played by men, but at least according to Wikipedia, beginning in 1912, they started incorporating female actresses, but there were still male actors who played some of the female roles.
That tradition probably would have still been surviving, even with a communist push toward some equality of the sexes. Yeah, I'm sure. So that actually, adds another element, which makes it perhaps more believable too, actually, or understandable. But in the play, the diplomat his name is René Gallimard, and the opera star is named Song Liling. And throughout the play, Wang draws parallels between their relationship and, of course, the very famous East meets West relationship portrayed in Puccini's opera Madama Butterfly about a young Japanese woman who marries a U.S. naval officer who ultimately abandons and betrays her with tragic but show-stopping consequence.
Yes, it's a great opera with a fantastic final scene where she commits harakiri. Hwang seems to be commenting on a common trope, that of the straight white male who fantasizes about seducing an exotic and submissive Asian woman. And the playwright seems to suggest that this fantasy has carried over to international politics with the West's attempt to dominate Asia over the past couple of centuries. Now, Greg, you are a student of history. Is that a valid commentary?
I think yes, to some degree, and I think it also to some degree goes both ways. I think that a number of Asian cultures and countries and people have understood the power that lies in being able to manipulate the West and these Western fantasies on every level. So I think that has played out in a should I say it yin and yang kind of way between the East and the West for centuries. And certainly it's interesting now because when this took place, China was still a very, very poor country, and although it was developing nuclear weapons and was considered a major threat to the rest of the world, it was still seen as being weak and on its knees. And now, of course, China is our great rival, the rival of the United States. So if you just put this again in the backdrop of great power rivalry and relations, I think there is some validity to it going both ways. Actually, both sides manipulating the other, perhaps, or maybe the West thinking they're manipulating the East more, but the East using that Western desire. So it's really interesting,
Yeah.
the dynamics.
On a more frivolous note, the theme also reminds me of a song from one of our favorite shows, The Drowsy Chaperone, where they sing, "What is it about the Asians that fascinate Caucasians?"
Which sounds like Rex Harrison.
Exactly. And of course, that song was a send up of The King and I, taking us back to Thailand. But it also applies to Butterfly. Anyway, Greg, what did you think of the show at the San Francisco Playhouse?
Well, I really enjoyed it. I will say it's too long, almost 3 hours. And when the first was produced, right, there was an effort to keep the mystery about Song Liling's gender intact. No pun intended there either. Now we all know. And so perhaps it's a little long to draw it out now.
In fact, a couple of interesting points. So, number one, B.D. Wong played the role of Song Liling originally, and the producers asked him to bill himself as B.D. Wong because they didn't want his gender to be obvious. They wanted it to be a surprise to the audience when he finally reveals himself to be a man and not a woman. And I think originally he was going to go back to, the name of Bradley Darrell Wong, but he won so many awards as B.D. Wong that I guess he just went ahead and kept it. Yeah. The play was revived on Broadway in 2017, I think. David Henry Hwang did revise it as well, and one of the things he changed was the surprise element of Song Liling being a man, because if you knew the play, you knew that was the twist. So he didn't want that to be an aspect of the suspense. But I agree that the play did seem long, and I looked at the website for the San Francisco Playhouse before we went to see it, and it said the play was 2.5 hours long. So that's what I was expecting. And then when it ended nearly 3 hours later, I was surprised, and I guess I got a little impatient. The same thing happened when I saw the Lehman Trilogy, which I'm going to talk about later, because the website said it was 3 hours long, and it turned out to be almost 4 hours, at least in the version that I saw. So theater companies, when you include the running time of your show, I think it's better to overestimate than underestimate.
Or what if you need to get home to your dog, which is always my case, or your children
Yes.
or your spouse or whatever, and you're
Hmm.
planning and someone's picking you up or something. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
One
But
other thing, the character of Gallimard is self-described as average, not very attractive to women, but because he's the center of the play and is on stage almost the whole time, he must be portrayed by a charismatic, commanding actor. And Alan, you saw John Lithgow.
yeah, and he fit that description to a T, because he's not that great looking an actor, but he's a superb performer, and he did have the charisma to hold the audience's attention through the entire play. Yeah, in this case, Dean Leonard plays
Yeah.
Gallimard, and
He's
I
good.
thought he was good, but maybe not quite charismatic enough to carry the play for 3 hours. What do you think?
See, I would disagree. I think he was, and actually maybe because he is pretty good looking as well. Not to just judge people based on their looks, but it's part of the theater experience. And he was commanding enough as a presence too that he pulled it off for me. I really was never bored by him or never I never had too much of him up on the stage. I think he did it really, really well. He looks to me too a little bit more in the mold of Jeremy Irons, who played the role in the movie. Um,
Okay. I never saw the movie.
you never saw the movie. I loved it, enjoyed it. And the movie creates a very atmosphere of intense heat that permeates China in the summer, and which I had been in Beijing in the summer, and it's incredibly hot, making it more sensual and also making it more mysterious, the mystery of the evening, the scents and the perfumes in the evening air. And the play caught that, and I think very well, by the way, too. So I really enjoyed that. But I thought he held his own really well and held up the production really well. So I liked him.
Okay, and then, the other half of the main
Yeah.
relationship is Edric Young as Song Liling.
Yeah.
I thought he was a strong actor, but he wasn't that
Yeah.
convincing as a woman, I didn't think. I mean, you knew
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
beginning that this was a man,
He's a guy.
even if you didn't
Yeah.
know the plot twist of the play. So it was hard to understand why Gallimard was taken in by the charade.
Because yeah, there's really no doubt that Young is a man masquerading as a woman. So I agree. One thing I would say though, maybe that works now again when we're not when the production is not trying to hide the fact quite as much to the audience that this
Hmm.
person is actually male. Maybe that's okay and just allows you as an audience member to think of Gallimard suspending his disbelief, which he had to have done on some level, I think, anyway.
Right.
Um,
Or maybe subliminally Gallimard knows that, he is a man and maybe there's a gay subtext there.
Yeah, and wants that, absolutely, which would be, some a more contemporary way to look at the play too.
Hmm.
So I think that could
Yeah.
absolutely be the case. But I will say about Edric Young, in the second act, there's a tense confrontation, which was really amazing, where the
Yeah.
character is forced to strip naked, and that can always be a awkward thing for the audience to experience too. Just you feel for the actor up there. Young though commanded the stage with, as you said, Alan, startling intensity, really impressive. And that just gripped me, it gripped everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I think he was much better in the second act when he
Yeah.
discards the pretense of
Yeah.
being a woman. So, maybe he's not as great as a female impersonator or drag performer, but he's
Yeah.
a very strong actor as a man.
Actor. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we know plenty of people who are better in drag performers. I won't mention them now. We'll talk about them in future
Okay.
podcasts, but he's probably not one of them.
Hmm. The rest of the cast was also quite strong, although there was an interesting casting choice where
Yes.
the French diplomat that Gallimard works for, I guess the French ambassador to China,
Ambassador.
is
Yeah.
written to be a man, and it's normally played
Hmm.
by a male actor, but in this case,
Hmm.
a woman was cast.
Stacey Ross. And I thought she was great. She commanded the stage whenever she was on for me. And I know, Alan, you said she reminded you of Sigourney Weaver in Working Girl.
Yes, yeah, again, working
Yeah,
girl, right?
which I can see, and she's really good at it. She reminded me though of Simone Signoret, just in general, of the actress
Hmm.
Simone Signoret, one of the greatest French actresses, one of the greatest cinema actresses of all time, right? Who also was of this era. And the way she held herself and spoke made me think of Signoret. And Simone Signoret was very, very politically active. In fact, Jane Fonda credits her with sparking her interest, Jane Fonda's interest in political
Hmm.
activism, because Jane
Well,
knew her when she lived in Paris and was married to Roger Vadim. Anyway, so I thought that was sort of appropriate for a Signoret type woman to be in this role at this time in China, dealing with communism and sexuality and all these other issues. So I thought she was great. I could watch a one woman play by her.
I didn't see the exotic aspect of Simone Signoret or the French aspect in Stacey Ross's performance, but I enjoyed her. I thought she was very
Yeah.
amusing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Very clever, very, very, yeah, very,
Uh-huh.
very bright. Yeah. So I loved it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I really enjoyed her.
So, yeah. So overall, I think it was a good production. We had a few quibbles with it, especially with the length. I would recommend that people see it. Yeah.
Yes, me too. Oh, it's completely enjoyable.
So M Butterfly is playing at the San Francisco Playhouse, 450 Post Street through March 14th. Now, while Greg was packing for his trip to Asia, I treated myself to a trip to San Jose to see the stage's production of the Lehman Trilogy. This is a work about the New York investment bank that famously went bankrupt in 2008 and helped trigger the Great Recession. The Lehman Trilogy begins by focusing on the three Jewish brothers who emigrated from Germany prior to the Civil War and initially based themselves in Alabama and dealt in cotton and dry goods. It then follows them through the remaining decades of the 19th century and into the 20th as the company moves its headquarters to New York, expands into various industries, and eventually becomes one of the leading financial powerhouses in the world. The play offers a probing history of capitalism over the last 2 centuries, as well as a tribute to the role that immigrants played in shaping America. One of the most startling aspects about the play is that it was written by an Italian, Stefano Massini. Massini is a poet, playwright, and novelist who was raised in Florence. He was raised Roman Catholic, but his father was friendly with many members of the Jewish community in Florence. And by some fluke, he sent his son to receive education in Jewish history and Judaism. So years later, when the 2008 recession devastated the world economy, the adult Massini researched the story of Lehman Brothers and saw in it an emblem for the fantastic growth and eventual implosion of capitalism itself. He fashioned the story into a 200-page poem/play/novel that initially took about 9 hours to perform. This caught the attention of Ben Power and Sam Mendes at London's Royal National Theatre. They contacted Massini, and after getting his permission, they edited the text into a 3-act play running about 3.5 hours for 3 actors. Now, the Lehman Trilogy opened in London in 2018 to great acclaim and later moved to Broadway, where it won several Tony Awards, including Best Play. The show has since been produced all over the world in many languages. Now, the production at the stage in San Jose is a bit of a marathon. It runs almost 4 hours, including 2 15-minute intermissions. This was my first time seeing the play, and I had mixed feelings about it. I thought it was riveting up until the time that the family ceased to be involved in the company, which occurred in 1969 with the death of then CEO Robert Lehman. I just didn't find the subsequent corporate machinations leading to the ultimate bankruptcy and demise of the company all that interesting, although I know it's necessary to complete the arc of the story. But in any event, this is a mostly engrossing evening of theater or afternoon if you go to a matinee, which I would recommend. And it's distinguished by the vivid and muscular script by Massini and Power, and the deft direction by Ken Kelleher, also the evocative slide projections that were collated and designed by Eric Scanlon. And then, of course, there's the protean efforts of the 3 actors, Peter Hadris, Johnny Moreno, and Brian Herndon. It really is an impressive effort. The Lehman Trilogy is running at the Stage Theater in San Jose through March 1st. So that's all we have today. Greg and I will be back in March with some new plays and performances to talk about. In the meantime, we'll see you at the theater.